So coming to a comfortable position at the front of your mat, and we'll get started. So my name is Elisa. Welcome to our yoga practice this morning. We're going to have an active flowing practice, but as we move in and out of poses, or even if we hold a pose, always honoring our bodies and choosing any options that fit our bodies today. So not needing to necessarily do exactly what I'm doing, and always having the freedom to rest when we need to rest, or to alter a pose to fit how we're feeling in the moment. So we'll come into our mountain pose once again. So maybe just stepping just gently from side to side until you feel a connection between your feet and the earth, rooting down through the four corners of both feet, and maybe even just doing a little gentle rocking forward and back or side to side, just so you can feel the ground supporting you underneath your body. And maybe even looking down, wiggling the toes a little bit, feeling the arches lifting away from the earth. And then as we settle into this pose, we're going to make sure our knees are soft. So having a little bit of a bend in the knees, and we'll roll our shoulders back and down, letting the palms face forward. Taking in a big deep breath, inhaling through the nose, and then exhaling, maybe a big audible sigh. And if it feels good, maybe repeating that 1 or 2 more times. And then just allowing yourself to come to an easy, steady, natural breath as you allow your eyes to either soften down towards the earth, or you can let the eyes close completely if that's feeling accessible. And again, still making sure the knees are soft, because as we come into this pose, into mountain pose, a lot of us will naturally tend to hyperextend the knees or lock them out. So making sure that they have at least a little bit of a bend. And as we begin to turn our awareness inward, we can just start to examine where the breath is going in this moment. Noticing the quality and the texture of your breath. So being aware of whether the breath might get stuck somewhere, or if it is smooth and steady. Making those observations without any type of judgments or creating any stories. Feeling the breath create a little bit of expansion every time we breathe in. So inhaling, expanding through the belly, and then the ribs, and then the chest. And then exhaling, releasing in that same order. So chest to ribs to belly. And we'll repeat that a few times. So just finding that 3-part breath, that diaphragmatic breathing as we create that expansion all throughout the torso. And again, starting all the way down at the belly, letting our bellies really expand. And then when we exhale, exhaling fully and completely, letting go of anything that no longer serves us. Letting go of expectations and judgments. Letting go of competition with anybody else, but most especially that competition we have with ourselves, where we compete with an idealized version of ourselves, or maybe even an earlier version of ourselves. Honoring the body that we have today, knowing that every time we come to the yoga mat, we're always just a little bit different. So moving within what your body has to offer today. And taking just a few more breaths right here. As again, you feel the ground supporting your body, rooting down to rise tall, maybe imagining a string coming out of the top of the head as we grow just a little bit taller, creating a little more space between each of the vertebrae. And then if your eyes are closed, just just allowing them to slowly flutter open in your own time, not trying to rush it. Then we'll raise our gaze and we'll start to move with the breath. So inhaling, sweeping arms out and overhead, and then exhaling, hands come down through to the heart. Inhaling, lifting, and exhaling, lowering. And as we move with the arms, making this movement fit your body today. So you can always exhale, arms out to the side, or you could change this movement a little bit. So if you're caring for shoulders this morning, if we have some arm issues, maybe turning this into cactus arms. Or even if it just feels a little more interesting to move this way, or if there's another way that you would like to move with the arms, finding that. But moving with the breath, letting the inhale open the body, and the exhale, we come back together. And if we're flowing through cactus arms, we might be feeling a lovely expansion for the chest and the front of the shoulders, and a nice strengthening to the upper back as we bring those shoulders towards each other. So just one or two more of your flowing breath, whatever you've chosen with the arms. And bring arms down alongside the body. We're going to take a wide stance. So if you're facing the top of your mat, maybe turning towards the long edge like I am, and knees and toes and hips are all going in the same direction. We'll take a nice wide stance as we prepare to flow through moonflowers. So first, starting with a little bit of a squat, we'll inhale, bringing arms up to the sky, coming into a 5-figure star. And then as we exhale, sitting down a little bit into our squat. So we'll start really slowly and subtly here. So maybe not going to our full depth. And then we'll inhale up. So as we exhale, squatting down only as far as feels good right now. Elbows can come to cactus arms to 90 degrees, or maybe bringing them closer to the body. You decide, so whatever feels good, as we start to create some warmth in the body, flowing through that moon flow. We'll peek down, making sure our knees and toes are tracking in the same direction. So knees are going towards maybe the second or third toe of each foot. If they're flopping in, maybe adjusting your legs a little bit. Moving at your own perfect pace. Inhaling to lift, and then exhaling to lower. We'll do just one more time like this. And then we'll turn this into sunflower. So first, again, coming back into our star. And this time, as we exhale, hinging forward, hands can come together, pinkies maybe touch, or we can cross the hands. If we're choosing to cross the hands, maybe paying attention to which hand goes in front. And then switching hands. So it's a little brain training, a little trick for our brain. Sometimes we might forget which hand crossed over first. Keys here are to keep the spine long. So rather than rounding forward or worrying about how far we're getting down to the ground, we want to keep that spine long, hinging at the hips, rather than worrying about getting our arms or our fingertips down to the earth. Still moving with the breath. We'll do just two more after this one. Feeling that movement and the breath start to heat the body. And then coming back in, we're going to come back into our mountain pose, at least as far as our feet are going. So our feet are hip distance apart, and we're going to start to flow through chair pose. So creating a little more warmth. We'll inhale. Hands can touch overhead if that feels appropriate. And then as we exhale, sitting back into that imaginary chair. And as always, arms are optional here. So if you'd rather bring hands to prayer or to the thighs, maybe experimenting a little bit, sitting the weight of the body towards the heels. And again, not worrying about how far down we get. We want to keep the natural curves in the spine. We'll think about engaging the core muscles as we sit there. And just one more after this one. This will be our last one right here. Then we'll take a step back to the front of our mats, finding that mountain pose. Big in-breath, maybe letting our eyes follow our hands. And then as we exhale, hinging forward, swan dive. We'll do 2 more just like that. Inhaling, lifting. And exhaling to lower. Deep bend in the knees as we hinge forward. Lifting and lowering with a strong, straight spine. This time coming into our forward fold. We'll shake out the head and neck, keeping the knees soft. Maybe starting to sway a little bit like a rag doll, letting fingertips trace the ground, or we can hold on to opposite elbows. Then bring hands next to the feet. We'll come down onto hands and knees. We'll start to move through cat and cow. So placing hands directly underneath the shoulders, maybe using fists for wrists if we have any wrist issues. Knees are underneath the hips. And we're starting here in a neutral spine. So imagining that maybe we have a glass of water on the low back. So just being aware of what that feels like. And then we're going to go on either side of that. So we'll inhale, letting the belly drop, letting the heart come forward into cow pose. And then exhaling, dropping the tailbone, starting to round the spine, bringing chin to chest to come into cat. Inhaling for cow, and exhaling, rounding the spine, creating extra space between each of the vertebrae for cow pose, actually cat pose. Moving with your breath, slowly or quickly, whatever feels good to the spine right in this moment. And then maybe staying with cat and cow, or if you'd like, you can start to get a little creative here on hands and knees, maybe adding some hip circles, or you could wag your tail a little bit. Maybe shifting forward and back a little bit. Paying attention to what your body needs right in this moment. We'll come back into our tabletop. We're going to add in a little bit of trunk rotation. So we'll inhale, and then as we exhale, starting to turn, bringing one hand to the hip or to the ribs, and then exhaling down, we'll inhale. So just a little bit of a twist. The hand can come to the body, or you could choose to open the arm up to the sky, whatever feels better to you there. Turning from the lower body and then letting the head travel less. If it doesn't feel good to turn your head, then keeping your gaze a little more neutral. Letting that elbow lift up to the sky. And again, we're opening the ribs to the side of the room, opening the heart. Just one more time to each direction. And then bringing big toes together. We'll let knees be wide as we sink our hips back into child's pose, finding a nice elongation for the spine. Forehead can come all the way down to the ground, or if it doesn't make it all the way there, you can stack the hands or a block or maybe a couch cushion or a pillow underneath the forehead. So just check in and observe any sensations in the body. So you might be more aware of the hips or the lower back, or it could be a completely different part of the body. So just observing what's happening for you and knowing that we never need permission to come into a place of rest. So if this feels good to you and you'd like to come back here at any point throughout the practice, always knowing that this is an option. From here, we'll inhale, extending the arms forward, and we'll walk both hands off the left side of the mat, crawling those right fingertips away from the right heel, creating space to the right side of the torso, into the shoulder, and then walking hands across the mat. We'll stretch them all the way forward on the right side now, reaching those left fingertips away from the leg, away from the heel. Getting that nice lateral flexion for the spine. Coming back to center, either choosing to stay in child's pose, or if you'd like to lift into downward facing dog, we can bring knees back into an alignment with the hips, crawling those fingertips forward and spreading the fingers very wide into starfish hands. We'll tuck toes under, lifting the knees, lifting the hips, coming into downward facing dog. Staying still or adding a little bit of movement, walking your dog, lowering one heel while the opposite one lifts, and then switching from side to side, starting to wake up the backs of the legs. Then lowering knees back down to the floor. We'll come into our child's pose once again. We're going to start to move through our half series vinyasa. So the bottom part of our sun salutation. So we'll start first with hands reaching forward. And as we inhale, shifting the body forward, you can either come into tabletop or kneeling plank with hands pressing into the floor, pushing that floor away from us, lifting the belly though. So lifting through the belly, making sure we're keeping the hips lifted as well, creating that plank of wood from shoulders to knees. And then exhaling back into child's pose. Inhaling to come forward and exhaling back. Creating our vinyasa. And anytime we have an option for vinyasa throughout our practice, and that goes for any day, not just today, this could be our choice, our option for our flow. Moving with the breath. Being aware of the core muscle. So drawing the navel in, and as we shift back, and as we shift forward, drawing that belly button in towards the spine. We can stay just as we are with this flow, or if we'd like, we could start to add in a push-up. So only if it feels appropriate, exhaling either halfway or all the way down, and then inhaling, pushing back up. If we are choosing to add the push-up, we'll keep elbows hugging in towards the body so we can get into those tricep muscles, backs of the arms. But that push-up is optional, so we might add it one round, skip it the next round, or maybe add in a couple extra push-ups. It's all about what feels good to you and honoring your body. So adding just one more round. And then coming back into that child's pose for a moment to check in, letting hands come back towards the feet, releasing the wrists if they were getting a little fatigued. Maybe circling the wrists. And then extending those arms forward, either staying in your child's pose or lifting into downward facing dog as we get ready to take a walk to the top of the mat. Inhaling, we can look towards the hands, And then exhaling, walking the feet one at a time all the way to the top into forward fold. Inhaling, reverse swan dive. And exhaling, hands come to the heart. We're getting ready to move through some sun salutations, and I'm going to start with some modified versions, but choosing the version that fits your body best. So if there's another version of sun salutation you'd like to do today, choosing that. Or as we add on, if you'd like to stay where we started, that's fine as well. So we're going to inhale, letting our gaze come up if that feels good, looking towards the thumbs. Exhaling, hinging at the hips, keeping knees bent, forward fold. We'll inhale to look forward, exhaling, crown of the head towards the floor, and we'll step the right foot back, lowering the knee down to the ground, coming into a low lunge. Hands could stay on the floor, or if we have blocks, maybe bringing hands to our blocks. If you'd like, we can choose to lift those arms either to the sky or into prayer. Exhaling, hands come back down, and we'll step back into a child's pose. Choosing to stay here in child's pose, or adding in that half series vinyasa that we just did. Inhaling and then exhaling. So your choice to flow or to rest. If you're choosing to add that vinyasa or any vinyasa, we'll make this the last one. And we'll come back into child's pose. On our next in-breath, we'll step the right foot to the top of the mat, finding that low lunge with the right knee and the ankle in a really healthy alignment. Keeping hands on our blocks or the floor. Or again, maybe choosing to lift. Exhaling, hands come to the floor. We'll untuck. We'll tuck those rear toes actually, and then we'll take a big step forward fold. Crown of the head towards the ground. We'll inhale halfway, adding in a monkey pose, keeping the spine long, engaging through the core. Letting our gaze come down to the ground. And then exhaling, melting. Inhaling, reverse swan dive. Exhaling to sit into a chair pose. We'll do that all again on the other side. So exhaling, forward fold. Inhaling, halfway, monkey pose. Hands could be on shins or on our blocks. And then exhaling. We'll step the left foot back this time. Coming into our low lunge, walking hands up that front thigh. And again, choosing an arm option here. So maybe something different. Letting go of any need for both sides of the body to look the same as we're moving. Exhaling comes down to the ground. And then we'll sit back into child's pose. Your choice to move or to flow here. Maybe staying in child's pose if that feels appropriate, or adding in your vinyasa. And then if we're flowing, we'll come back into child's pose. Inhaling, we'll step that left foot to the top of the mat. So now we are in our low lunge, once again with the left knee over the ankle. Making any arm options on this side that fit the body, that fit how we're feeling. Exhaling, hands come down and frame the front foot. We'll tuck the right toes under to lift the back knee, and then big step, or as many steps as you'd like, to come back into forward fold. Inhaling, we'll lift halfway. Feeling that strong core, that length in the spine, and maybe even lengthening the spine just a little bit longer, as if our spine were like a bungee cord. Exhaling, coming into that forward fold, and then big inhale, reverse swan dive. Exhaling to sit into chair pose, and then inhaling up. So we're going to add one more round on each side of our sun salutation. So either feeling free to repeat just what we did, or maybe taking it to toes this time, or any combination. Inhaling, sweeping arms up. Exhaling, leading with the heart as we dive forward. Inhaling halfway. Exhaling, hands come to the floor. And as we step the right foot back, that back knee can come to the ground or it can stay lifted. So either low lunge or we can be in a crescent lunge, letting that right heel reach towards the back wall. Hands can come to the front thigh or they can stay on our blocks or the floor. Letting the shoulders relax and our gaze be soft. Exhaling, hands come down. And this time as we step the left foot back, we can choose either a down dog, child's pose, or that vinyasa. Making the choice that's appropriate for this moment. Not needing to make the same choice each round. And then as we come back into child's pose or downward facing dog, we'll get ready to step that right foot to the top of the mat, giving it a little bit of help if it needs it. Right knee is over the ankle. Or in our crescent lunge, or we can be in our low lunge with the back knee on the floor. Relaxing shoulders down away from the ears. And then exhaling, hands come down to frame the front foot. Lifting that rear knee off the ground if it was lowered. And then big step into forward fold. Inhaling halfway. Exhaling, melting. Inhaling to sweep up. Exhaling into our chair pose. One more time on the other side. Exhaling, we'll swan dive, forward fold. Inhaling to look forward. Exhaling, melting. And this time as we step the left foot to the back of the mat, we'll come into our lunge of choice. Feeling that strength, that nice stretch for the front of the back leg. And then hands come to the floor. We'll step the right foot back to meet the left. Your choice here, downward facing dog, child's pose, or a vinyasa. Coming back into downward facing dog or child's pose when you're ready. Inhaling, we'll step the left foot between the hands. Coming into your lunge with the back knee on the ground, or it can be lifted. Setting your gaze. And then exhaling, hands come to the floor. We'll step right foot to the top of the mat, coming into forward fold. Inhaling to monkey pose. Again, feeling that strength in the core and that nice stretch for the whole back of the body, keeping knees bent to protect the hamstrings. Exhaling, melting. Inhaling, we'll sweep up. Exhaling, we'll find a chair pose. And then big inhale. This time as we exhale, taking our swan dive, bringing hands to the floor, and we'll step the right foot back and then the left foot back into a downward facing dog. Having the option to lower knees down to the ground if that feels appropriate, or we could add in a little bit of movement to our down dog, maybe pedaling the feet once again, or we might choose to come into a three-legged dog, lifting one leg up to the sky, keeping the hips square, and then lowering that foot down, switching to the other side. So any movement that your body needs right now, or stillness. And lowering knees down to the floor. Coming into any variation of child's pose that you'd like right now. Turning our awareness inward. And noticing how the body feels after we've been flowing for a little bit. So we might feel a little warmth, a little heat. Maybe you're feeling the heart beating. Maybe you're more aware of one part of the body than another. Just making those observations. Not needing to attach any stories or judgments, just being with whatever is. Taking 1 or 2 more breaths right here. And then we're going to lift into another downward facing dog, letting hips come to the sky. Lifting through the pelvic floor, engaging root lock, Mula Bandha. So imagining that the inner thighs are energetically drawing towards each other. We're drawing in and up. Then taking a walk to the front of our mats. Keeping knees soft as we inhale, sweeping arms out and overhead. Bringing hands together at the heart. We're going to take a big wide stance on our mat once again. So legs are wide, we're facing the long edge of our mat, and feet are parallel to one another. So earlier when we were flowing through moonflowers, our toes and knees were going towards the corners, and now everything is parallel. And we might choose to have our blocks nearby, and if you don't have blocks, you could have a couch cushion or some books, anything if you want a little extra lift for the floor. So we're going to add in some twists here. We'll inhale, and then as we exhale, we'll bring our hands behind the thighs, keeping knees soft, and we'll hinge forward, letting the hands trace behind the legs. So first coming into a wide-legged forward fold, noticing how this might feel a little different than when we were in our forward fold from mountain pose with our feet hip distance apart. We'll take a few breaths here. We're going to inhale. We can bring hands to our blocks. Again, anything that we'd like to have to bring the floor a little bit closer to us. Or hands could be on the floor. As we exhale, we'll bow, rounding through the spine. Crown of the head towards the floor. Inhaling to extend that flat back. Exhaling to lower. So we'll do just a couple like this. Keeping knees bent as much as you'd like, and feet can be as wide apart as you'd like. So if you need to make any adjustments so that you feel good in your body, doing that. So exhaling, coming back into that forward fold, we're going to add in our twist. So we'll take the left hand directly underneath the face, and again, we can either have it propped or on the ground. And as we inhale, we'll lengthen the spine. As we exhale, taking a twist to the right side, opening that right arm to the sky, opening the heart, either looking up to that top hand or down to the floor. Exhaling, we'll bring that right hand down, place it where the left one was. Remembering we can use something to bring that floor a little closer. We'll inhale, and then exhaling, turning. Letting the breath flow steadily. If you notice the breath is getting labored or you're holding the breath, maybe backing out a little bit. We'll exhale. We'll do a couple more times to each side. So inhaling, lengthening, exhaling to twist. Lowering down. We'll do just one more time to each side. Exhaling down, inhaling, and then exhaling to turn. Exhaling, coming back into that forward fold. Hands can come behind the ankles or the calves, wherever you'd like, as we let the top of the head reach down towards the ground, keeping at least a little bit of a bend in the knees. And then walking both hands over to the left thigh, holding on anywhere, either up higher on the thigh, down by the calf or the ankle. And then walking hands over to the right leg. Maybe feeling this more into the back of the leg or the inner thigh. And then coming back to center, we're going to bend our knees with a nice deep bend, bringing hands to the thighs, And as we inhale, slowly coming up with bent knees. Now we'll turn those toes and knees out once again towards the corners of the mat, and we'll soften our knees coming into Sun Goddess pose, opening the arms nice and wide. Fingertips are up towards the sky, thumbs are towards the back wall. Inhaling, we'll come up, and then exhaling, bringing hands together at the heart. Taking a step back to the front of our mat. So coming back into mountain pose. Again, maybe just moving the feet a little bit till we feel comfortable and feel rooted and grounded, finding that hip width distance of our feet. Letting our gaze come out over the fingertips. And then stepping the left foot back. We're coming into Warrior One. Right knee is facing the front of the mat, right knee and toes. Left foot is at an angle. Squaring shoulders to the top of the mat. We'll inhale, arms maybe up into traditional warrior arms. And then adding in a little movement, we'll inhale, arms back. And then exhale to come back into that Warrior One. So actually exhaling, arms back, and then inhaling, lifting arms up. We'll make this next one the last one, and we'll sit into that Warrior One once again. Rear foot is pressing into the mat, so if the heel is lifted a little bit, we could shorten our stance, bringing that foot in a little closer. On our next in-breath, we'll turn the torso towards the long edge of the mat, maybe stepping those feet a little wider, coming into Warrior Two. Right knee is over the ankle once again, and the knee is tracking towards the second and third toes. So if we notice the knee dropping in a little bit, giving it a little bit of help, strengthening that front thigh. Turning the right palm towards the sky. We'll inhale, finding a reverse warrior. Right hand is over the shoulder. Looking up, or we can look down to the floor. From here, we're going to exhale, bring the forearm down to the thigh, coming into side angle pose. Right forearm is on the thigh, left arm is lifted. Still sitting down into those strong legs. And we're going to move through those two poses just 2 more times. So inhaling, reverse warrior. Exhaling, side angle pose. 1 more time, just like that. Inhaling to lift, opening through the ribs. Exhaling, coming into our side angle pose. Inhaling, we'll lift back into our Warrior Two, letting our gaze come out over the right fingertips. Pivoting on the rear foot, we'll come into a runner's lunge, and then we'll step left foot to meet the right. And big inhale, reverse swan dive. Exhaling, hands come to the heart. So we'll do that all on the other side, and I'm just going to flip to the other side of the mat. So starting in mountain, we'll step the right foot back, setting up for Warrior One. Left knee is over the ankle, and we'll square shoulders to the top of the mat. Adding in a little bit of movement here with our warrior. We'll inhale, exhale, bringing arms back, and then inhaling to sit back down. So if that breath pattern isn't matching your body, just making sure the breath is moving with us as we move. So we never want to hold the breath. We'll sit into our Warrior One, finding that strength, finding that power of a warrior. And as we inhale, we'll turn our torso to the right towards the long edge of the mat. And again, you might want to choose to step the feet a little bit wider here. Feet can be kind of in railroad tracks, or if you want the right foot a little wider apart, you can do that as well. We'll send our gaze out over the left fingertips. We're going to add in our reverse warrior. So turning left palm to the sky, inhaling, lifting. Right hand can come to the back leg or around the body. And then coming to that combination we had, we'll exhale, left forearm down to the thigh, right arm can lift into side angle. We'll do that 2 more times. Inhaling. So legs stay just as they are. We're only moving with the upper body. Strengthening both upper and lower body as we do this. Exhaling, coming back into our side angle pose. Using the right side of the body, we'll lift back up, coming into warrior 2. Cartwheeling the arms, coming into runner's lunge, and we'll step back, choosing either downward facing dog, child's pose, or maybe taking an option to add in any movement, whether it's a vinyasa or it's walking your dog, maybe swaying the hips in child's pose, whatever your body needs right now. And if we're flowing, we'll come to stillness. Either in down dog or child's pose. And we'll get ready to walk our hands back to our feet. Coming to the back of our mats. We'll inhale, taking a reverse swan dive. Exhaling, hands can come together at the heart as we get ready for a little bit of balance. So for today's balance, we're going to play with a really subtle little bit of movement, and we might choose to be near a wall. We might choose to have blocks nearby if we want to maybe place our toes on our blocks. But what we're going to do is we're just going to start first in a mountain pose. So feet are about hip distance apart, and we'll start to shift the weight into the right foot. And as we do that, we might start to lift the left heel away from the ground. Arms can be at your side or in prayer. And for some of us, this might be enough of a balance challenge for today. So choosing to stay here if this is appropriate. And checking in, making sure our hips are level. Sometimes when we balance, we shift our weight off to one side. So tucking that leg in and lifting strong, finding that root lock, that Mula Bandha, that pelvic floor lift. And we can maybe choose to extend the left leg forward, flexing that foot. We'll keep a little bit of a bend in the knee. So we're not trying to lift the leg very high here. We're just playing around with our balance a little bit because we're going to add in some movement. And remembering we can pause anywhere along these options. But if you'd like to add in that movement, starting to shift that leg back. So the standing leg is virtually stayed as it was. And we're adding in that little bit of movement. So first we had the leg forward, now we have it back. Now we're going to bring it in. So we have that foot flex to keep the foot away from the ground, or you could tap it, and then we'll go out to the side. And noticing maybe all the strength that this glute medius needs to have or to engage to hold us here. We'll take one more breath and lower down. So you might want to shake out that standing leg, shake out the arms, add in some movement before we go to the other side. So we saw our options, and we don't necessarily need to do the same things on both sides. We can try, but if one side of the body likes to balance more, or one side maybe has an injury, we might choose to modify. So we're going to start to shift the weight into the left leg. And again, making sure that that hip doesn't sass its way out, keeping it in line so hips are level, keeping the right toes on the ground if that feels appropriate. Or we can start to experiment with that movement that we have where we brought the leg just a little bit forward. So it's a few inches off the ground, not very high. We're not doing a thumb to big toe balance here. This is more an exploration and balance. And remembering we could stay right here, or we could tap the foot before we move on, or we can start to just glide that leg back. So hips are still where they started. They're still in line with each other. We'll flex the foot. And we might choose to experiment with our arm options. And then we'll bring that foot back maybe an inch off the ground and then out to the side. So smiling, knowing that smiling helps our balance. And then whenever you're ready, coming back into our mountain pose, always adding that little bit of movement to thank our bodies, thank our hips especially. And remembering, anytime we balance, whichever leg is the standing leg, the supporting leg, that's really building up strength, because that hip, especially that glute medius, the gluteus medius on the side here, that really has to engage to hold us, to keep us strong, to keep us balancing. And of course, we have to always thank our feet and our legs as well. So coming back into our mountain pose, we're going to add in just a couple more standing poses before we come to the floor. We'll take a big in breath up, and then exhaling, we'll twist to the right side. We'll inhale forward, and then we'll exhale, twisting to the left side. Coming back to center, we're going to add in a lateral flexion. We'll take the left hand around the right wrist, push that ceiling away from us, and then take a nice side bend here to the left side, looking up under the right arm, or we can look down to the floor. We'll inhale back to the sky. Exhale, switching hands. In breath to lift the ceiling. And then exhaling, taking that crescent side bend. Feeling the side body really lengthen, creating space between the ribs. And then inhaling all the way up. Exhaling, big, beautiful swan dive. Hands come to the floor, and we'll walk our feet back into our last downward facing dog of the day. Inhaling, we'll come forward to a plank, lowering knees down to the ground if you'd like. And then using the strength of the body, we're going to lower with control. So strong arms here, strong core, as we lower everything down to the floor all at once. Untucking the toes, bringing hands underneath the forehead, taking a breath or two. So forehead can be resting on the backs of the hands or on the forearms. We're going to come to Sphinx pose. So if you're feeling any sensation in the lower back right now, this might be where you choose to stay. Or if you want to work on strengthening the back a little bit more, we can bring elbows underneath the shoulders. Forearms are about shoulder width apart, and we can check that by bringing our hands to the elbows. So once we find that shoulder width, we'll bring forearms back to the floor, and we'll spread the fingertips really wide. So those starfish hands, once again, legs are long, and we'll engage those thighs. So you might feel the low belly start to lift away from the ground. So hips are pressing down, low belly's lifting, shoulders are down away from the ears. So one thing to be really cautious of is that we don't want to be down here with our shoulders up by our ears. We want to lift out, so like a turtle lifting out of its shell. Strengthening the entire back. So we'll take 1 or 2 more breaths right here, knowing you can always lower out of it whenever you need to. And then exhaling, we'll lower down, either letting our head stay in alignment with our spine, or we could turn our head to one side. We'll bend the knees, letting the feet lift up towards the sky, just letting those feet sway side to side as if they were seaweed on the bottom of the ocean. And then bringing our legs back down towards the floor. We'll place hands next to our shoulders, lifting up, and then making our way onto our bottoms. We'll extend those legs forward. And you might want to keep a block nearby if you have one. If not, don't worry about it. And we'll hold on to one leg, use that as a handle to lower onto our backs. Hugging knees to chest. Maybe adding in some circles for the knees, or you can rock back and forth or side to side. If we're adding in any type of circular motion, always making sure we go in both directions. And lowering feet down to the floor, we're going to come into a bridge pose. So we'll walk feet in line with our hips, arms are next to the body. And fixing our gaze up towards the ceiling so we keep the back of the neck long. We'll inhale, starting to peel the tailbone. So we might feel the hips starting to lift, and then very slowly, one vertebra at a time, to come into bridge pose. Making sure that the legs aren't flopping out to the side. So we'll energetically hug the inner legs towards each other. They don't have to actually touch. It's just that energy of them drawing towards each other as if they were magnetized towards each other. Staying just as we are, or if you'd like a little more for the upper back, we can start to walk the shoulders underneath the ribs and maybe even interlacing hands underneath the glutes. Making sure we still feel comfortable in the neck. If at any point this feels uncomfortable, lowering down, bringing knees to chest. This feels okay though. We'll stay here for just 1 or 2 more breaths. If we've interlaced hands, we'll release them and we'll come out of this 1 vertebra at a time, slowly lowering all the way down to the floor, letting the spine come to neutral. And then from here, maybe hugging those knees back into the chest, or we could choose to come into happy baby, lifting feet up towards the sky, holding on behind the thighs, the calves, or reaching for the bottoms of the feet. Drawing knees down towards the armpits. And if it feels good, maybe adding in a little bit of a rocking motion, just like a happy baby. Or you can stay still like a dead bug. And slowly releasing this, we'll bring feet down to the floor, letting the feet be as wide as the mat. And we'll just add in some gentle windshield wipers. Letting knees drop from one side to the other. Coming back to center. If you do have a block nearby or a cushion or a pillow, we can come into a restorative version of bridge pose. So we just did a very active version of bridge. And now we'll give ourselves a break. Now, if you don't have any extra cushioning or a block, then you can stay just as you are. But if you'd like, lifting the hips, coming into that bridge pose, and we'll place the block or the support underneath the sacrum. And the sacrum is that triangular bone at the base of the spine. So it's above our glutes. And we can allow ourselves a few moments here to just be held and supported. Noticing how nice that can feel, allowing ourselves to let go. And staying here if this is feeling good, or maybe lifting one or both legs to the sky, coming into a supported version of legs up the wall. Or if you're near a wall, you can actually do the same pose right up against the wall. It's a nice way to reverse the flow of blood and reverse the flow of lymph. So our blood has a pump, which is the heart, but the lymph doesn't. So we need to do things like movement and turning ourselves upside down like this to help move the lymph. So I could stay here all day, but we'll get ready to come out of this pose, bending the knees, lowering down. And then if we are on a support, we'll take that away. And we'll take this opportunity to come to any final movement or any final pose that you'd like to do. So if there was a pose you were hoping to do in the practice today, adding that right now, or if there's just some pose your body needs, adding whatever it might be. So it might be another twist, maybe some more windshield wipers. And if we're going to add in a twist, making sure to twist to both sides. So if we were adding in a movement to one direction, making sure we get that other direction in as well. When you're ready, coming back into a neutral position, we're coming into a place of stillness, finding our final relaxation, Shavasana. So that could be with knees bent, maybe letting the knees drop towards each other into constructive rest, or maybe a more traditional final relaxation with the feet wider than the hips. Letting the arms be out alongside the body with the palms up in a gesture of receiving. Fingertips start to curl in towards the palms. Allowing the body to slow down. Connecting the body to the earth. Just surrendering the weight of the body. Allowing the shoulders to sink a little deeper. And as you're ready, beginning to invite some movement into the body. Tracing thumbs over fingertips, wiggling the toes. Bending the knees to roll to one side. And then using the hands to help lift to an easy, comfortable seat. Lengthening from your root to your crown. As we inhale, bring arms overhead with thumbs to the forehead for good thoughts, to the lips for good words. and to the hearts for good intentions. The divine light within me honors the divine light within you. Namaste. Thank you so much for allowing me to guide your practice today. Namaste.